right now. I watched him defeat my good friend Matt Satarski last round to have an opportunity to play in. He's playing Ban Hexproof, and Brad, as we all know, is on Junk Aristocrats.
And we're in game 1 right now. Looks like Diego is facing down an army of Spirit Tokens, a Young Wolf, a Flip Garruk Relentless, along with an Obsidian. So even though he has a Geist Saint Trap the Rancor on it, not really an effective attack right now. Brad is at 8 life. Let's see if Diego, I'm not sure if Diego has any cards in his hand, but it looks like we're on Brad's turn, and Brad's debating what he wants to do this turn.
Yep. Not sure if that Garruk has already been used this turn or not. It appears the answer would be no.
You know, there certainly are, with Brad at 8, there are certain cards that, like an Infliction Courage is probably a good draw. Spectral Flight, a Spectral Flight probably does, so the Geist Saint Trap will be a 6 power. There's only 2 flyers along with the, no, so it looks like Brad has enough blockers to sort of survive an attack like that. So let's see what Brad does here. Obsidian comes over, dropping Diego down to 8. And not sure if Brad has another play this turn. Looks like he has 1 card left in his hand. Yep, it's just a Godless Shrine. And Obsidian's going to get phased out, potentially bringing Brad up to 10 next turn. So Diego's really going to have to get something going here. Looks like he just drew a land for the turn.
I would assume that the rest of his hand is probably lands, as well as Ban Hexproof doesn't have a lot of really reactive cards to be sitting on. Basically just Spell Rupture in Diego's deck.
Yeah, you can tell the Geist didn't attack last turn, so if he didn't draw any gas this turn, it's probably not going to be attacking this turn either. Diego just adding up the math, seeing whether or not he has an extra turn or not. With Diego sitting at 8, it's unlikely he's going to get an extra turn out of this, especially if Brad can activate the Garruk and search for something like a Blood Artist or a Sacrifice Effect, if he has one in his hand. So
that is not a good sign for Diego.
Yeah, passing back, not exactly what Diego wants to be doing. He's going to draw, Brad's going to draw a card for the turn. Diego goes down to 6, Brad goes up to 10, putting him further out of range of that Geist Saint Trap. So now, I believe Diego's probably going to have to chump block here. If Brad decides to just go all in with everything, which is, I think, a reasonable plan here, Diego likely has to block the Obsidian with the Geist Saint Trap.
Yeah, again, there's a very limited range of cards that Brad has to play around here. He has to, if he actually knew Diego's list, he would know that there's really nothing to worry about here. It's possible that he's thinking about cards like Selesnya or Simic Charm, which could potentially punish him if he gets too aggressive, but there's a very narrow range of things to play around.
Yeah, and now he also has Gavany Township, so I think he feels pretty confident that he's going to win this turn, regardless of whether or not Diego has like a Simic Charm perhaps. And that's exactly what happens. Brad swings over with all his creatures, and Diego just concedes there. And yeah, I agree with you. There's not many cards that Diego could have had there. Even if he didn't have the Gavany Township, I still think Brad probably makes that attack, simply because there's just too many cards Diego has to have in order for him to actually even win that game. Diego only has 8 power potentially with the Angel coming in off the Geist Saint Trap. Brad's at 10. He would probably need an Infliction Courage, an Ethereal Armor, but Brad can also search for another possible late life gain card or a way to block the Geist Saint Trap. So I think that Brad was probably okay to attack there regardless of what Diego had to say.
Yeah, the Ban Hexproof deck plays so much on its own main phase, and the spot that Diego was in, he looked compelled to just add anything to the board that he could to give himself the most time. So the odds that he's sandbagging some monster hand to blow out Brad there is really, really low, and like you said, the Garruk gives him a lot of insurance because he can search for something if somehow combat goes wrong.
Yeah.
So we're going to be going into the sideboard games. Brad stepped away from the booth for a moment. Welcome back. Patrick Sullivan, Joseph Levidovich. We're in the final round of the Swiss here at Grand Prix Miami, brought to you by StarCityGames.com. And let's look over the sideboard options.
You know, Brad's deck, he has some interesting cards that he can board in. He has 3 copies of Abrupt Decay, which are pretty good against Ban Hexproof. Obviously, you can't go after a Geist Saint Trap or Invisible Stalker, but you can kill all the enchantments that they put on those creatures, which is very important. That's one of the ways that they can break through. So dealing with an Infliction Courage, dealing with a Spectral Flight, dealing with an Ethereal Armor, very important sometimes. So I definitely can see Brad bringing in those cards. He also has 2 copies of Duress. Again, you just want to go after those enchantments because that's really the only way Banned Hexproof has to sort of break through. Brad's deck has a lot of ways to sort of gum up the ground, so I don't think he's too afraid of being able to block a Geist-Sustained Draft. But I think the cards he's afraid of are cards like Unflinching Courage or Spectral Flight, which can become problematic for him. He also has 2 copies of Appetite for Brains and another Ghost Council. Don't see those coming in, along with Sin Collector. Again, you can go after the cards, you can go after cards in their hand, but Sin Collector can only go after sorceries and instants, not enchantments, which is really the cards that you care most about. So I can see the Abrupt Decays and the Duress coming in, but beyond that, the rest of his sideboard is probably more focused for other matchups.
Yeah, and on Diego's side, he has the ability to bring in another Spell Rupture. He has 3 copies of Mending Touch, which is probably for sweepers. Feeling of Dread, Nevermore, Negate. He has cards that are, in theory, provide some utility, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him bring in another Spell Rupture. But the Junk Aristocrats deck is actually so low to the ground, it doesn't take a lot of mana for them to get the ball rolling, that I would be suspicious of bringing in a bunch of counter spells.
Yeah, I don't like bringing in counter spells in this matchup. I don't like Strangler Geist that much in this matchup either, just because, you know, it's not a very effective tacker considering how Brad can gum up the board. One card I do kind of like is Nevermore, simply because if you can name Abrupt Decay on Nevermore, with Nevermore, there's really not many answers that Brad has to the enchantments anymore. So I think maybe boarding in Nearhearth Pilgrim and Nevermore for some copies of Strangled Grace and your Spell Ruptures could be an effective strategy, because sometimes an easy way to win is just go turn 2 Invisible Stalker, turn 3 Rancor, and copy and soul bond it with my Pilgrim and start gaining life that way. Because again, Brad doesn't have a lot of removal spells. He's probably not going to keep in the Tragic Slips after board. Pretty bad against Banned Hexproof. He's going to bring in the Abrupt Decays, but if you can use a Nevermore to name Abrupt Decay, you can kind of have that strategy very viable. And Pilgrim provides a good life swing when you're trying to race a deck like Aristocrats.
Yeah, it's you know, we think of Pilgrim being good in the mirror match and Life Gain in general being good against mono red. A lot of the Junk Aristocrats deck is trying to do exactly 20. They don't really have an overwhelming board. They're trying to ping you to death with things like Blood Artist, occasionally Obsidat, and getting in shots with Lingering Souls tokens, and so forth. Life Gain actually pretty reasonable against them. We had a match where we watched Todd Anderson yesterday play against Naya. The Naya deck brought in Unflinching Courage. It actually was very good in that matchup, even though the guy with Unflinching Courage eventually died. That life swing was significant, and Trample was valuable as well there too. So I think the life gain is probably a little under-respected in how good it is against Junk Aristocrats.
Yeah, and the thing is, again, Brad's in an awkward spot because he doesn't really want Tragic Slip in this matchup. There's not that many cards that you can get rid of. You can kill a Voice of Resurgence, but how great is that? Beyond that, you know, there's not really that many cards in Banned Hexproof where Tragic Slip is great against. Whereas a card like Nearhearth Pilgrim, could be a problematic card. It makes racing very difficult. How many copies of Tragic Slip do I keep in order to protect myself against Pilgrim? You know, I have to keep him honest somewhat.
Yeah.
So both players are done shuffling. They're going to look at their 7 cards hands to see if they're okay. Diego is on the play, so he has to choose whether or not he wants to keep first. And he is not happy with the 7 cards. He's going to ship them back, whereas Brad is happy. Brad, you could tell he's a little nervous right now. You can tell he really wants this top 8. You can kind of feel it getting a little closer. He's up a game. His opponent's mulliganing. Here it's all about just maintaining. Do not let the nerves get to you. Focus. Make sure you take the correct lines and just, you know, hope for the best.
Yeah, and you know, if you've interacted with Brad much, you know, 2010 Player of the Year had an absolutely dominant stretch. Really haven't seen many players put up the numbers that he did in 2010. Success has been a little bit more elusive for him since then, and so he really values these opportunities to top 8 Grand Prix, put up good numbers at the Pro Tour. He wants to be getting back to those 2010 numbers, and so
yeah,
even a player as experienced in these situations as Brad, you know, he understands and values the moment and really wants to get this top 8.
Yeah, and he's had some close finishes recently too, where he just came short. So that also kind of is in the back of your mind in these types of situations. You're like, all right, things are going good. I'm 1-1 away from that top 8. I'm up a game. My opponent's mulliganing. Don't mess up.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can affect your play. But Brad's been on this stage before, and you know, we're confident that he's not going to let that get to him. Diego now debating whether or not he wants to keep a 6-card hand. Looks a little hesitant. Yeah, he is not happy. He is shipping back, going to 5. Now Brad, a little happier.
Sitting up a little bit.
Sitting up a little bit more, not nearly as stressed. So looks pretty good for Brad so far. But again, Diego's deck doesn't need that many cards to be successful. You know, a Geist with an Unflinching Courage and 3 lands could be enough sometimes. So let's see what his 5-card hand brings him.
Again, the Ban Hexproof deck, if you've been watching any of these feature matches this weekend, is prone to mulliganing quite a bit because it needs 3 colors of mana very fast and needs a mixture of creatures and creature enchantments. And there's just going to be a lot of hands you draw that don't qualify. That said, the good hands that this deck gets are so explosive, and they don't actually need much in terms of raw cards.
Yeah.
So this is a deck of any deck in the format that's capable of mulliganing to 6 or 5 cards. I know my friend Matt, who I referred to earlier, who lost to Diego last round, won a match earlier this weekend on a mulligan to 4 on the play.
Yeah.
This deck, with the colors of mana and a mixture of creatures and creature enchantments, can win with very few cards. So do not count Diego out of this game.
Because I wouldn't say it's technically an all-in deck, but it's very close. So for those types of decks, again, if you have a Geist and an enchantment, sometimes that is good enough in certain matchups. So I agree with you. It does have the potential to win off a few cards. Not as consistent as a deck like Reanimator that can mulligan effectively, just because of the kind of synergies that are inherent in that deck. But looks like Diego is happy with his 5-card hand. He does have an Invisible Stalker, which is step 1 to the comeback, so to speak. And it looks like we have a Breeding Pool, comes to play untapped for 2, and then Avacyn Pilgrim. So looks like a reasonable start here. And then we have a Young Wolf for Brad Nelson.
So most importantly for Diego with this start is access to all 3 colors of mana.
Yeah, so Breeding Pool produces green and blue mana, and Avacyn Pilgrim taps for white. So potential for a turn 2 Geist here. Let's see, is it possible? Looks like we have an Invisible Stalker. It looks like he actually has a Strangler Geist in his hand too. It looks like he kept it in.
So debating between Stalker and Strangleroot Geist.
And there's the Stalker. And again, you mentioned it. That is one of those cards that can randomly pull you back into this match if you have an enchantment to go along with it. But Brad does have an Abrupt Decay. So Abrupt Decay will give him a little defense against any possible shenanigans that Diego has in terms of Unflinching Courage or Rancor.
And Brad's start here of Wolf into Aristocrat means that he's going to be very effective at locking up the ground. It's going to be very prohibitive for Diego to be attacking on the ground, which means that he's going to be leaning very heavily on his unblockable creatures like Invisible Stalker or on Spectral Flight. Those are going to be his tools, because just attacking with creatures like Strangleroot Geist at this point is going to be very ineffective.
And that's one of the reasons why I was expecting Diego to board out those Strangleroot Geist, because Brad's deck is just too good at gumming up the ground. It's not very good. And here you see the Strangleroot Geist, he did keep it in, and it's going to a mulligan to 5 and having a card like Strangleroot Geist in your hand, pretty awkward spot to be in, because it's effectively a mulligan to 4. That card probably is not going to have a huge impact on the game, other than being a blocker, which isn't really what you want. So Brad here debating what he wants to do. He looks like he does have another Cartel Aristocrat. He also has a Doom Traveler, which will provide him another good card to sacrifice the Cartel Aristocrat. Looks like both creatures are going to come over now. Let's see what Diego decides to do here. Again, he does have that Strangler Geist, which can block. Could jump in front of the Young Wolf, but the Young Wolf does have Undying as well, so it'll come back as a 2/2.
Yeah, the creatures that Brad has in play are all annoying to get involved in combat with for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
So I assume that we're going to put Strangleroot Geist in front of something, because it's certainly not going to be attacking very effectively. You might as well absorb some damage. But again, speaking to your point earlier of the struggles of Strangleroot Geist in this matchup, it's very hard to block effectively against Drunk Aristocrats.
So Brad still has that Abrupt Decay in his hand, but doesn't feel a need to cast it anytime soon, so just commits another Aristocrat to the board, furthering his board presence, and again, gumming up that ground. So, oh wow, here comes a Rancor from Diego, trying to get that race going. Now the Invisible Stalker is 5 power, because Rancor gives it +2, and Ethereal Armor gives it +2 because there are 2 enchantments in play. So Brad Nelson takes 5 this turn. And again, he does have that Abrupt Decay to deal with the Ethereal Armor.
But of all the creatures in Diego's deck, Invisible Stalker is by far the most challenging for Brad's deck to interact with.
Yeah.
Even Geist is trapped, still needs to be attacking on the ground usually. It needs a spectral fight to get over a lot of Brad's defenses. And even then, Lingering Souls can provide some amount of defense.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Invisible Stalker, there's not much in the way of Edicts. I actually don't know if there's a card in the 75 that can handle it. And you're seeing it right now, even with Diego on 5 cards, that Invisible Stalker is giving him a chance in this game.
So Strangleroot Geist can potentially block that Young Wolf here, and Avacyn Pilgrim can jump in front of the Doom Traveler. However, probably unnecessary right here because the Doom Traveler is just going to come back as a spirit token. So I could see Strangleroot Geist probably just jumping in front of Young Wolf here. Decides to block the Doom Traveler instead, soak up 1 point of damage only, and the Strangleroot Geist will survive this turn. However, it looks like Diego's race is all going to come down to whether or not he can draw either another enchantment or a Nearhearth Pilgrim.
Yes.
I'm not sure if he boarded it in or not, but here comes another Aristocrat on the board. Diego took 6 that turn, I believe dropping him to 9, and Brad still has that Abrupt Decay, so the race is still potentially in his favor unless Diego top decks yet another enchantment or the Pilgrim.
He needs exactly one of those cards because he's still doing fine. Diego's still doing fine on the race if he draws something relevant this turn, something that induces an Abrupt Decay, because Diego still keeps Brad on 2-turn clock. If Diego drew nothing of significance and Brad's able to simply Abrupt Decay this Ethereal Armor, the race gets swung dramatically back into Brad's favor.
Yeah, so now Ethereal Armor gets destroyed with Abrupt Decay, and that changes the race dramatically. Brad only drops to 6 now, which means that there's really not an enchantment alone that can boost up the power of Invisible Stalker. He's probably going to need Unflinching Armor, Unflinching Courage just to sort of gain some life, but I'm not even sure that'll be enough now. With Diego at 9, Brad has 9 damage worth of attackers on the board. Diego does have 2 blockers, but Diego's in rough shape right now with the race.
Also keep in mind, because some of Brad's threats are Cartel Aristocrat, it's not simply enough for Diego to stay alive through this turn and then chump block next turn. If he falls into, say, 2 or 4 life left after this combat, Brad can simply sacrifice creatures to make his Cartel Aristocrats unblockable and finish the game that way. So
that's why I like the Pilgrim jumping in front of the Aristocrats now. Like you want to be able to. I think you want to block when you can, or maybe you just block. Yeah, actually, I think you probably just block. You block the Young Wolf with the Strangleroot Geist, and then just take the rest. You'd only take 2, 4, 6. You take 7, dropping to 2. But if Brad doesn't have a follow-up here, a top deck enchantment could potentially win you the game along with your Avacyn Pilgrim attack.
Yeah.
So let's see what Diego does here. Yeah, because even Brad won't have enough creatures to sack everything to make all his Aristocrats unblockable next turn.
So you see Diego simply chump block.
Oh, wow. Lingering Souls. Huge draw there for Brad. Now, let's see. Is Unflinching Courage on a Strangleroot Geist an out for him? I don't believe so. It's 5 power, 4 damage will get soaked up. Yeah, so that's not enough.
Yep.
Brad just has too much on the board here.
Lingering Soul shutting the door on even Unflinching Courage as a draw, which is Diego's most powerful play here.
And he did have it. Wow. So good draw there by Brad Nelson. Flinching Courage, that's only 5, dropping Brad to 1, bringing Diego up to 7. However, Brad has well more than 7 damage. He has 5 in the air alone, along with the Cartel Aristocrat. You can just give it pro green. So that's it. Brad Nelson wins his winning in, going up to 13-2, defeating Diego Pedraglio with Bant Hexproof. And you know, Diego put up a valiant effort, especially after a mulligan to 5. Unfortunately, a timely Lingering Souls there for Brad Nelson gave him just enough defense to make sure that he wouldn't die to an Unflinching Courage.
And like we were talking about when Diego was in the middle of his mulligan to 5, there's some decks where mulligan to 5 cards is just the death knell because they're just trading 1 for 1, or they need a bunch of mana, or whatever the case. Bant Hexproof is one of the decks where that's just not really a thing. A mixture of the colors of mana and a durable creature and some creature enchantments can take you home even on 5 cards. And if Diego had found that Unflinching Courage a little bit earlier in that game, he might have had a real shot of winning that one.
Or if that Strangleroot Geist was a Nearhearth Pilgrim, he probably wins that game. So I'd be really interested to find out what Diego ended up boarding in, because Stranglegeist, I mean, yeah, it blocked a couple of creatures, but it really didn't do much beyond that. Whereas a Nearhearth Pilgrim could have been, probably ends up winning the game there, right?